Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Nur Haziq bin Sulaiman and I'm from class 3E. Today we want to talk about the subtopic of public finance, which is fiscal policy. So fiscal policy is largely based on the ideas of British economists, which is named John Maynard Keynes, who argued that economic recession are due to a deficiency in the consumption, spending, and business investment component of aggregate demand. He believed that government could stabilize the business cycle and regulate economic output by adjusting spending and tax policies to make up for the shortfall of the private sector. His theory was developed in response to the Great Depression, which defied classical economic assumption that economic swings were self-correcting. So, in Keynesian economic, Keynesian economic is a macroeconomic of total spending in the economy and its effect on output, employment, and inflation, stated that aggregate demand or spending is what drives the performance and growth of the economy. Aggregate demand is made up of consumer spending, business investment spending, net government spending, and net export. According to Canadian economists also, that the private sector component of aggregate demand are too variable and too dependent on the psychological and emotional factor to maintain sustained growth in the economy. Pessimism, fear, and uncertainty among consumer and business can lead to economic recession and depression. Excessive excitement also during good times can lead to an overheated economy and inflation. However, according to his also, that government taxation and spending can be managed rationally and used to counteract the excessive and deficiency of private sector of consumption and investment spending in order to stabilize the economy. Fiscal policy measures employed by government to stabilize the economy, specifically by manipulating the level and allocation of tax and government expenditure. It is to achieve or maintain full employment, to achieve or maintain also a high rate of economic growth, and to stabilize the price and wages. That is all from me. Thank you.
So next is the type of fiscal policy. There has two types of fiscal policy, which is expansionary fiscal policy and contractionary fiscal policy. For the expansionary fiscal policy is designed to stimulate the economy. It is most often used during a recession, times of high unemployment, or other low periods of the business cycle. It entails the government spending more money, lowering tax or both. And for the contractionary fiscal policy, it is used to slow economic growth, such as when inflation is growing too rapidly. The opposite of expansionary fiscal policy, contractionary fiscal policy raises tax and cuts spending. As consumers pay more tax, they have less money to spend and economic stimulation and growth slow.
We continue with summary of the macroeconomic issue. For the first one, investment opportunities. Business can see investment opportunities from government spending as well as private investment. This typically occurs during an expansionary policy because taxation is also low, more capital comes into the economy from the government and from other sources. Businesses may expect to prosper and expand when a balance between price and demand is reached. For the second one, slower growth. A contractionary financial policy may kick in to prevent inflation when the balance is broken and demand and price falls. Usually, because of rising taxes, companies rein in their growth and take steps to remain in the black with less capital flowing into the economy. For the third one, taxation changes. Depending on their location, business face several levels of taxation, including local, state, and federal. Businesses have to deal with the way they are taxed by their state and local government and how it interweaves with federal fiscal policy. And the last one, unemployment rates. A major objective of fiscal policy is to minimize unemployment. The government, for instance, will lower taxes and bring more money back into the pocket of customer. As such, it may be possible for individual to spend more money and business may face increased demand. Additional development tasks for business may be complete with increased demand, and companies may react by creating more jobs and recruiting more employees. As such, a low unemployment rate can gradually rise with a proper fiscal policy in place.
Assalamualaikum and hi to Madam Anita. My name is Ikmal Farhan bin Sharum. Today I am going to present about discuss based on the microeconomic theory from the topic fiscal policy. An expansionary fiscal policy seeks to increase aggregate demand through a combination of increased government spending and tax cut. The idea is that by putting more money into the hand of consumer, the government can stimulate economic activity during time of economic contraction. During a recession or during the contractionary phase of the business cycle. While expansionary policies necessarily increase the budget deficit or decrease surpluses in the short term, the idea is that by stimulating more economic activity, the overall economy will expand, making up for short-term deficit with long-term economic growth. This is because even a relatively limited stimulus is smartly targeted can have multiplier effect across the entire economy. According to Keynesian economic theory, expansionary fiscal policy is one of the most effective tools. Government have to promote economic activity during period of recession. During this period, aggregate demand fall of business and consumer cut back on their spending. If left unchecked, a drop in aggregate demand can create a vicious circle whereby weak consumer demand leads business to invest less, which further depress demand and so on. To counter this circle, an expansionary fiscal policy has two essential tools. Okay, first is tax cut. Whether they take the form of overall rate reduction of refundable credit, put more money directly into the pocket of consumer. Increase government spending, often on the public work, in order to increase the overall level of employment. Notice that in the case of the both of option, the most basic goal of expansionary fiscal policy is to increase demand in the economy by giving people more disposable income, boost and spur consumer spending and business on the investment. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Amira Ainsarina binti Muhammad Mahmud. So I will continue to another slide, which is economy success factors. The success of the economy is commonly measured by a few factors including GDP. Another factor is aggregate demand, which is the sum of goods and services produced by a nation purchased at a certain price point. The aggregate demand curve dictates that at a lower price levels, more goods and services are demanded, while there is less demand at higher price points. Fiscal policy affects this measurement with the goal to increase GDP and aggregate demand in a sustainable manner. It does by discharging three factors, which is business tax policy. Tax that business pay that to the government affects profit and the amount of investment. Lowering tax increases aggregate demand and business investment spending. Next is government spending. The government spending is aggregate demand is increased by the government's own spending. Next is individual tax. Tax on individuals, such as income tax, affects their personal income and how much they can spend, injecting more money back into the economy. Fiscal policy typically needs to be changed when an economy is running low on aggregate demand and unemployment levels. The two main tools of fiscal policy are tax and spending. Tax influence to the economy by determining how much money the government has to spend in certain areas and how much money individuals should spend. For example, if the government is trying to spur spending among consumers, it can decrease taxes. A cut of taxes provides families with extra money, which the government hopes will, in turn, be spent on goods and services, thus spurring the economy as a whole.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad Syamil bin Zulkifli. Okay, now I will present about the conclusion from our article that we choose. Our article talk about the fiscal policy. Okay, so for the conclusion, fiscal policy is the implemented to smoothen the fluctuation in the economy associated with the business cycle. So this involves reducing government expenditure or raising tax when the economy is on the verge of overheating. Conversely, at the onset of recession, as problem unemployment and declining output, was the government shall cut taxes or raise government expenditure to boost its economic activity. Now, as we know that we learn fiscal policy is impact the amount of taxation on the future generation of individual and business. So the government will spending that leads to greater deficit mean that the taxation will eventually have to increase so that will pay the interest inversely when the government run on the surplus, tax must eventually be lower. So that's all from my group. Thank you.